Well lads, I was scrolling through Twitter a while ago. Terrible start, I know, but stick with me. I saw this tweet that read, "Bad game design isn't real. It's a term made up by YouTubers to justify their petulant whining." Yeah, this is gonna go down great, isn't it? Now, to be fair, he's right, at least to a degree. YouTubers are whiny feckin' creatures. I would know. What am I doing right now? But something about this tweet just bothered me for months. It was nagging me in the back of my mind, and I could never quite figure out why. I knew it wasn't a jab at what I do. I mean, I wasn't directly labeled in it or anything. This wasn't something I received in a comment. And either way, it's entirely justified. I mean, the vast majority of game talk or video essayists are infuriating to listen to, especially when you're more knowledgeable on whatever topic they're covering, whether it's because you're genuinely qualified or just better informed. Again, I would know. I've seen TF2 players make Overwatch videos. And I mean, even for myself, I have probably pissed off actual game creators and designers. I mean, if any have seen my older videos, I probably owe them a handwritten apology. To get back to my point, I knew this post bothered me because I disagreed with it, but at the same time, I saw, understood, and to an extent even agreed with what it was saying. But for the life of me, I just couldn't put my finger on why it bothered me so much every time I went to the shower, until one night I realized I had a class on this and actually retained the information. Game design is interaction design. So let's start off here. What is interaction design? Well, it's the design of the interaction between the user and products. Yeah, that's a great help. Let's go with an example. When you see a door, I can pretty easily guess what your first action will be, because it definitely isn't this. Within interaction design, there's a concept called affordances, essentially an object having a built-in hint that you instinctively know how it can be interacted with, such as a door. When you see a door handle, you know to push it down and push or pull based on the build, or better yet, doors seen in more public spaces. They'll have handles indicating that they should be pulled, or a flat slab indicating they're to be pushed. This is all basic, good interaction design. You know upon seeing it the intended way the object should be interacted with, which is why these are a crime upon humanity. Doors that swing both ways, while a great comment to make about your friends, can afford to have two push or pull indicators. But if the doors only open one way, why on earth would you give it two handles? It's the most obvious example of bad interaction design that I think we've all encountered at some point in our lives. But where do games come into this? At their core, games are interactive. While on a technicality they're not the only interactable art form, they're the most common and I would call them the best one. With interaction baked into the core of a game, naturally interaction design can also be found at this core. I mean, the easiest place to look at is simple movement. Why do you think nearly every game uses the analog stick or D-pad or WASD for movement? It's what we've come to expect after all these years, meaning affordances can be made where some games don't even need to tell the player how to move or control their character. So where can we see something reminiscent of bad interaction design in games? I'd say that Lorelei in the Laser Eyes is one of the best. When going through a menu, there's an expectation of two yes or no buttons, A and B respectively. Now PlayStation, you've got your own issues when it comes to symbols, so I'm going to stick with the two real button layouts here. Lorelei doesn't have this. There is only a yes button. In fact, every button does the exact same thing. Do you want to go back? Made a mistake? Gotta click on the X at the top. Now this wouldn't be the worst decision ever, just a mildly annoying one at best. That is until you realize that 1. You're going to be spending a lot of time going in and out of the menus in this game, as it's where all the information you collect lies, and 2. Every button does the same thing. There is no menu button. If there's nothing in front of you to interact with and you hit a button, the menu will open. If you can interact with something and you hit the button, you start interacting with it. So if you want to open the menu when in front of a puzzle, you gotta do this awkward dance away to give yourself the space so that you can open up that menu. And once in there, after finding the information that you need, there's no exit the menu button. You gotta find the dedicated exit button within each menu, and they aren't even consistent. This one's a door on the left. This one is a small X on the top right. Over here is a slightly larger X in the top left. While this is much closer to UI and UX design, and that's what most interaction design in games is, but because of how much this bleeds into the game, I would call this bad game design, and it's only made worse by the fact that if you accidentally open a puzzle, there is no close the puzzle button. You can't exit until you try and answer. It's an incredibly clunky control scheme, or better put, an incredibly clunky way to interact with the game. This decision was intentional by the devs. They had a dev blog where they stated they didn't want the game to be bogged down by complicated controls. With their own metaphor, and I quote, "An intricate meal should not be hindered by a complicated fork." Lads, I'm just trying to have my dinner and this utensil keeps morphing between a fork and a knife depending on what it thinks I need. Just give me separate utensils! So I hope my point is clear. Bad game design can exist from a basis of bad interaction design. but in one place in a game having something that would be called bad design doesn't actually make it a bad game. Lorelei is really good, which means a lot coming from me since I'm usually not a massive fan of games that are just strictly puzzles. And this also applies to all media. I mean, so many modern films and shows have horrendous audio mastering. Think about how many times you haven't been able to hear dialogue that was just fine a second ago, or had to turn on captions so that you can actually understand it all. But this terrible audio mastering doesn't automatically make all these shows absolutely terrible, it's just an aspect of them that isn't up to snuff. There are places where bad interaction design can pop up outside of menus and other such elements. Inaccurate hitboxes, glitches, bugs, and other such things that break a game are part of it, but only one of those is usually ever intentional. I mean, I don't think CD Projekt Red intended for Cyberpunk 2077 to release in a state of mass murder. I mean, it'd be like a museum charging you for entry, then not allowing you anywhere in it aside from the bathroom. Like, sure, the museum is bad, but does it really speak to the quality of the actual art inside? But what about proper, full-on gameplay-only elements that can be considered examples of how good or bad game design is in fact real? I'd say one of the most topical ones is fairly recent with multiverses. During this game's beta, it was smooth, fast, responsive. People were absolutely loving it. The beta ended, 6 months passed without much going on, the full game releases, and suddenly it's slow, floaty, and clunky. Nothing like the game it was half a year earlier. New characters were released that felt like they didn't belong. They added this zoom-in camera which just completely ruined the days of characters like Tom and Jerry who needed the full screen for their moves, and of course there was a global 30-frame delay on all inputs. Now, to some people, this change came to be something they enjoyed. Slower pace, more deliberate gameplay was a plus to them. Of course, slow-paced gameplay is not a bad thing, it's absolutely personal preference. I mean, I don't enjoy a lot of FromSoft games, or even the Tekken series, because I just find them too slow, because I'm too used to way faster-paced games. Overwatch just ruined me. I don't think there's anything wrong with either of them, it's just my own preference. But if what was promised and initially showcased was fast-paced gameplay, which suddenly turned slow, I'd say that's grounds for the bad card to be pulled out. At the very least it is if no communication as to why such a drastic change was made was given. I mean, to take Overwatch as an example, whatever your opinion on the 5v5 switch was, at the very least it was communicated, we were given the reasons for it, unlike multiverses which just switched things up without a word. Now, it was announced a while ago that the game is closing down, but they've also fixed a lot of the issues that many had with it. It's returned to the fluid, fast pace that it was known for, and just to round things out with how it's been presenting with, they've returned to the interactive design players were expecting. They've gone back to what their initial promised design was. They always want to deliver on something when making a game. Like any creator, there's a certain emotion, feeling, or experience that they want to deliver to whoever's consuming it. Take Rainworld again, which wants you to feel like the Slugcat, small, vulnerable. The game wants you to know that you are not the main character, which it succeeds at tremendously. Or just to make it even more obvious, rage games. Their goal is clear, to be annoying, frustrating, infuriating, whatever word you want to use. And it's because of that that you can never say that a rage game is designed badly for making you frustrated. That's the entire purpose. But what about the opposite? If it's good when the experience the dev wanted to create was achieved, what happens if they fail at crafting it? And honestly, this part is too subjective, so I'm just going to offer my own take on it. I think if you fail to do what you set out to do when creating a piece of media, be it a movie, drawing, game, painting, whatever, then it's fair to consider it bad. Just to use my own work as an example, I worked as an editor for years, making Overwatch montages and frag movies where the feeling I always wanted to create was a sense of hype, excitement, a wish to go out and play the game because of what you watched that made you want to do something similar. But when I watch a lot of my old ones, where I was still learning, or even when I considered myself fairly proficient to the point of actually getting paid for it, they do not deliver on it well at all. As time went on, I like to think that I got better at crafting these feelings. Some more recent ones, and realistically recent is still several years ago, like Kroger, Chaos and Judgment, and the Super Shy roster reveal, or the Overwatch World Cup Team Ireland video, delivered on it to varying degrees. But I believe these to be some pretty good pieces of work that I've made because they achieved what I set out for them to do, and most people who have watched them agree. But there's quite the flaw in my logic. Take a horror movie for example. If it didn't scare you and you're the only one it didn't scare, is it a bad horror movie? Based on my logic, to you it may be, but since the 29 other people in the room shit themselves, wouldn't that make it good? Now that does depend on if their drinks were laced with laxatives or not, but for the sake of my own argument, let's just say that's how scary it was. This is why it's up to personal interpretation, but in my book, since it achieved what it set out to do for the vast majority, I'd call it good. I mean, pleasing everyone just isn't possible. I mean, to a degree it isn't, in fairness. Like, Oxygen has been working wonders for years. I've never seen a soul say that they hate fresh air. Now that last idea does seem to drift it quite a bit away from interaction design, but in reality it's baked into the idea. Rain World can only make you feel isolated by having you explore its world and learn what you can. Rage games like Getting Over It will only make you angry because you're so dedicated to the interaction of its intentionally slippery control scheme, and the strong wish for success that it creates means that the game's constant attempts at getting you to fail irritate you even more. And of course this applies in the reverse direction as well, though a longer example is needed for this, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to traumatize some people. League of Legends. I'll skip straight to the point, Singed. Some only know him from Arcane. Others know him because he's between your first and second towers 30 seconds into the game. League has characters intended to be frustrating. Shaco and Teemo are the poster things of that idea, and since they achieve it, on the one hand I have to compliment Riot for designing them well. On the other I hate them, but that's not the point and it's just subjective, so anyway. Singed, however, doesn't really have a design purpose other than move. I mean, literally his entire purpose is to just run around the fight to apply his poison on everyone, and to that end he succeeds, but there's a critical issue. Unlike single-player games, where the design is usually a one-way street, there's what the player can do to enemies and what the enemies can do to the player. That example's beyond simplified, but look, just listen to me for a moment. In PvP games, there's both the design of the player playing the character and the player playing against them to keep in mind when creating just the one character. The road is going to go both ways, as in what does player 1 have to do in order to achieve their goal against player 2, and what is the way that player 2 can play around this. And of course this is ignoring multiplayer environments where people will be playing alongside player 1. To return to Shaco and Teemo, they piss off enemy players tremendously, which is their goal when being played against. So naturally the goal when playing as them is to use their kits to win the mental game, primarily through baiting people with invisibility and traps, so in order to beat this, the enemy needs a scanner item to let them see through it. So with this logic, you'd assume that Singed design while being played is to spread poison around the battlefield, resulting in pressure being spread across the entire team. You'd think that the enemy's goal would be to stop him from doing this, to stop him from running, but it's the exact opposite. One of the most popular or famous phrases in League is never chase a Singed, because you're falling right into his game plan. The best way to interact with a Singed is not to. The best thing to do is nothing. It's anti-interaction design. The best way to open this door is not to. No emotion is being brought out. No feeling is being presented to the table. There's no tension and release of it. There's no feeling of accomplishment for outplaying him. You just let him do his thing while you don't get to play the game. I'd argue the one true bad of game design is literally encouraging players to not interact with the game. There's a difference between something like Singed encouraging you to not do a thing compared to something like your opponent in a fighting game playing passive and punish oriented. Yes, there's less interaction, but it's still there. It's an intentional choice to change the interaction as opposed to an objective, strongest choice in the situation, the one that you're intended to do, made by the developer, of not interacting at all. No matter what way you slice it, this entire discussion is baked in opinion and subjectivity. I mean, depending on how far you think the concept of art goes, calling something good or bad just isn't an option in an objective sense, because good and bad are inherently subjective concepts unless we're talking about the expiration date on milk. The only way I think an objective of bad can be put onto a design is if the intention just does not meet the execution, which I've already explained during this. If you put like bright yellow text over a white background because you're trying to display information, no one's going to be able to make that out. But if for some reason this absolute crime against reading was your intention, then I mean, you made art, I suppose. I would call it art. There's intention behind it. I can't call it a bad design. I don't fucking know. What I'm mainly getting at is that this discussion was nearly entirely superfluous. Whether or not someone is saying the design of a game is good or bad, whether they're saying it's objectively good or bad, who cares? Go form your own opinion on it. That said, it wasn't entirely superfluous, because the author of that original tweet had a bunch more going through that thread, one of which read, "Good and bad design does not exist, only good and bad designers." Now maybe I lack literacy and comprehension skills at a level that none can comprehend, but would that not imply that good and bad design does exist? Because a good designer would make a good design and a bad designer would make a bad design? I'm starting to realize I just made a video in response to bait.